In case you weren't familiar, there's a Splatoon manga that has been ongoing since Splatoon 1 was out. A viewer familiar with the manga had the idea to send me a list of team compositions from the various teams with the idea that I'd analyze them and judge how well the game's strategy is portrayed. A couple issues immediately emerged. As I was looking at the weapon comps listed on the page, I realized that I had no idea which metagame I should be discussing. Different weapons rise to significant top-level use or fall out of it, depending on what state the game is in. Also, the manga starts in Splatoon 1. I had a hunch that turned out to be correct, that they'd have the kits they have in that game, which would be a problem for me, since I never played Splatoon 1 for more than 2 hours, so I'm not familiar with its metagame. I'd never read the manga before, but I went into an English translation of it, and that confirmed it. One of the teams that represents the first major obstacle to the protagonists run a comp consisting of 4 ink strike weapons. No, not triple ink strike, just ink strike. They were Splatoon 1 kits. That said, it also became pretty clear that there wasn't going to be all that much in the way of tactics to discuss based on how the manga portrays the game. Let's talk for a second about our protagonist, Goggles. Goggles plays for Team Blue, who canonically start their first tournament off at ranks C, C-, C+, and B-. They're in the lowest 4 ranks you can be assigned in the game. Goggles is a mischievous boy character who takes very little seriously and is always getting up to antics. And that's basically all there is to know about him other than his weapon choice and how he fights. Even though he's the main character of the manga, the Inkipedia page spends more words discussing which outfits he wears than his personality, plot points, and relationships with other characters combined. He has 3 character traits. He is unfazed by any opponent, or really anything that happens at all. He's very agile in battle, and... So before I got into the manga itself, I was just reading some wiki entries, and I came across this line. He is also shown to engage in practical jokes, mostly pantsing other inklings and getting naked in public. That felt like a weirdly specific thing to point out. Calling him a practical joker, yeah, that makes sense. But over the course of such a long-running series, there have to be a whole bunch of different kinds of pranks. Maybe the writer of the wiki entry was trying to list a few examples to give you a general idea, but poorly chose the wording and ended up accidentally suggesting that most of the practical jokes are this. The naked in public part can't be the majority of the practical joking. Actually, it is. This is the third part of Goggles' personality. His teammates keep trying to get him to put on clothes, and he keeps coming up with inventive ways to show up in public without clothes, which is played as a running joke throughout the series. Ooh, we're in Splatoon 3 now? Now there's this special called an ink vac? Uh-oh, better watch out, it's gonna suck his clothes off. Oh no, he's naked again! They riff on it only so much that it's not quite exactly the same wording or situation every time, but it's always the same joke. He just really wants to show up naked and embarrass his teammates or something. That quad ink strike team is ultimately beaten after Goggles pantses their leader. Yes, sneaks up behind him and pulls his pants down as a prank. And that distracts them enough that his teammates are able to mount a counterattack. It becomes very clear after reading more than one of the battles through to its conclusion that this manga exists to sell the game and has very little other thought going into it. This is not a character-driven story. The battles are extremely formulaic, reading the first Turf War match and then comparing it to the most recent Turf War match that's played in the Splatoon 3 installments. They're still following this formula. At the start, Team Blue is getting wrecked, as the obligatory anime and manga side character points out from the sidelines, as they're fighting against a formidable opponent, using a weapon that Nintendo felt like highlighting in that issue. Everyone is shocked at how powerful the opponent is, but Goggles is unfazed. He's willing to give it a try no matter how intimidating the opponent seems. The Quad Ink Strike team was supposed to be 4 S+ players, while Team Blue is all in the bottom ranks, but nope, Team Blue wins anyway. Through Goggles' power of pantsing the enemy captain, I guess. He pulls off some sort of trickery, usually involving being fast-moving or flanking, and then when hope seems lost, Headphones, a female inkling on Team Blue, who's actually the team's hard carry low-key, hits a clutch shot to save someone, and then either Bobblehat or a fourth member follow up to save her, and now they've won a fight in the last 30 seconds, and Team Blue wins the game. I haven't read the entire series, but in what I have read, they always win the game. And yes, if you haven't picked this up, even the most important characters' names are all just pieces of gear they wear. It feels like the instructions given to the artists were to do as little as possible with story elements and make everything revolve around experiences a player could actually have in the game, with very few exceptions given even to the main characters. The antagonists get the most characterization by far, as they monologue about the way they see the game and their teammates, but even then, you can boil down their personalities to around 3 bullet points, and they all seem to have the fatal flaw that they never played Pokemon or watched the Pokemon anime to learn that friendship is the way to win competitive Nintendo games. They tend to be outdone by failing to coordinate with their teammates, rushing into 1v3s, or not having their teammates cover their weak spots, berating their teammates for not being good enough. It feels like they're made to embody the experience of encountering a random player that's higher level than you in a turf lobby who's using a weapon you've never seen before, and the manga is meant to move the reader through the feeling of encountering a weapon that can do something you've never seen before, adapting to it, and winning through the power of teamwork. It's like they didn't want someone to be disappointed when they opened the game up and realized there wasn't a deep character drama built into every individual Turf War match they played. They didn't want to set that expectation in the manga, so you didn't have it in the video game. You can be Goggles just by picking the gear he wears, the weapon he uses, and zipping all over the map, flanking like a maniac and giggling the whole time you're doing it. That's all he is as a character. So maybe that gives him this similar quality to the Nintendo silent protagonist, your Links and Samuses, where you can make the character an extension of yourself and never break the immersion that you are who they are. The game is largely aimed at kids, so this kid Goggles may be someone that the kid who would read the manga could see themselves in and see themselves becoming when they boot up the game and get his gear. But it doesn't serve the manga nearly as well, because manga is a storytelling medium, and there's very little story the writers can produce out of the characters themselves. That said, I remember being 12 and thinking the same exact joke was still funny after having repeated it daily for 2 years. So maybe that's all they need to entertain the target demographic. Maybe public nudity absolutely slays the Japanese 5th grade audience in the primary school comedy circuit, and I'm just being culturally insensitive for being tired of it. Let's talk about what few aspects of the game the manga does actually engage with, and evaluate them, because there are some parts that seem to show at least a fundamental understanding that we can give them credit for. The main strength of Team Blue being coordination makes a lot of sense. Mechanical skill will only get you so far. At a certain point, you need to be a good teammate, not just a good duelist. There are some differences in the portrayals of the playstyles of different players and weapon types. Given how unsubtle basically everything else is in this manga, I doubt that all of these are intentional, but for example, the protagonist's team comp in Splatoon 3 era consists of a Splattershot, a Slosher, an Octobrush, and a Tri-Stringer. The Tri-Stringer, Headphones, routinely comes to her teammate's rescue, and being a backliner, that makes sense, doubly so for being the Tri-Stringer. Whenever a fight is going poorly, there's a Killer Whale 5.1 on its way if her main weapon can't reach. And that's exactly how that weapon is played. You position so that you can always play a role in every single fight that happens anywhere on the map with at least some part of your kit, whether that be arcing shots at the main weapon, lobbing a Toxic Mist over at something, or reaching cross-map with the whale. Goggles plays the role of skirmishing, using his unique ability to dodge shots, and therefore creating openings for his teammates to help out against the opponent that's shooting at him. Then, someone like Bobble tends to be around with the Slosher to clean up opponents who are already engaged on her teammates, which is a midline slayer sort of thing to do. If you give the writers a lot of credit, there's some reasoning to why the weapons are portrayed the way they are in terms of their general playstyles. Sure, a Splattershot isn't the first weapon you'd go to for what Goggles does with it. Its shorter range means it's going to get bullied out of position by longer ranged weapons, and its movement speed is slower than other weapons, making it less than ideal for dodging around quickly. But the Splattershot is the Splatoon equivalent of picking Mario in Mario Kart, and it makes sense as a mascot of the series, so I'll let him get away with it. In the Splatoon 3 era, they fight a 96 gal user who struggles to get their aim on Goggles as he jukes around, completely naked by the way. Maybe that's a subtle comment on the 96 gal's poor accuracy and slow fire rate? Who's to say? That said, there are some aspects even of basic gameplay that get represented pretty inaccurately. A lot of the time, teams will coordinate to throw multiple specials all at the same time. 3 ink strikes at once in the Splatoon 1 era where they didn't come packaged together in groups of 3. Multiple booyah bombs thrown at the same time. These kinds of strategies give the artists a lot to work with and look really impressive on the pages, but in a competitive environment, all the other team has to do is wait a few seconds, back up while the specials land, and then re-engage confidently, knowing the enemy team wasted all their specials. Now they can use a special or 2 to gain an advantage, and save their remaining specials to keep that advantage as they push their opponents further and further back, maintaining momentum with a steady flow of specials staggered one after the other to keep the advantage for longer. If you end up using even 3 specials at a time, you'd better get enough out of them to nearly wipe the enemy team, because otherwise it's generally just not worth it. Better to use a special or 2 to engage, and then when the enemy team retreats from that, regroups, and commits to counter-engaging, you use another special to thwart that. Another aspect I really don't like is just that Team Blue seems to win all the time. In the Pokemon anime, it took Ash many, many years before they let him actually become the very best that no one ever was. He lost quite a few heartbreaking close matches in climactic moments of the show, and it made it a lot more meaningful when he did finally get it done. But Team Blue marches up to their very first tournament in the most unserious way possible, play against a team round 1 that's Quad S+, and win. Granted, there was some shenanigans going on where Goggles snuck up behind the leader and pantsed him, but at a Quad S+ level, letting someone sneak around and hard flank like that is a pretty major mistake that you don't expect to happen that often. As soon as that happens, Team Blue suddenly becomes a well-oiled machine, pulling off coordinated plays, hitting charger shots, getting in roller range and nevertheless beating them at close range with a splatter shot. This is frankly unrealistic to expect of players at C-Rank. The mechanical skill just tends not to be there for someone so new at the game to be able to compete with players who have made it to the highest rank possible. If there were, then that ranking wouldn't mean anything. The mentality of Team Blue also just randomly becomes significantly better all of a sudden as soon as Goggles' prank happens. Lower level players are often struggling too much with the mechanics of the game to be able to process higher level thinking, like collecting information about teammates' positions and positioning to be able to support them when a fight breaks out. But Team Blue just suddenly snaps into it, and everything works from there on. I'd be a lot more interested in the storylines if the main characters had to lose matches to learn these kinds of lessons, but they just already inherently know them somehow. No mentors taught them, no coaches pointed them in the right direction. They were never frustrated by making mistakes and having to learn hard lessons from them. They were just kinda the very best that no one ever was, even before they'd gotten out of C-Rank. I think that sets an unrealistic expectation for readers that if they play, they're going to be able to succeed very quickly just for understanding a few very basic fundamentals and being able to apply them. A lot of players who aren't used to competitive games come into a game like this that people are optimizing and get upset because they've played single-player campaigns that are designed to be beaten and feel entitled to success, feel that it's only going to take a relatively low amount of effort to accomplish all their goals. Beating a game's multiplayer, though, is not as easy as just pulling your opponent's pants down and running around like a chicken with your head cut off while your friends bail you out. You're not bound to be successful every single time you use a special weapon. Not every turf war match you play where the opponent has 75% of the map under control is going to be won back in the last 30 seconds. If you want to be the best, you're going to have to be humble and learn from players better than you. Nobody starts out as the best there ever was, and the best there ever was has a much more mature, thoughtful mindset about the game and life in general than Goggles the Nudist. Man, with how much time canonically passes from Splatoon 1 to Splatoon 3, and with it apparently being confirmed that Goggles is at least 14 in Splatoon 1 era, does that mean that now he's like 21 and he's this like fully grown man who's just running around? You know, I'm just gonna think of this like he's Ash, like he's just always as young as he starts the series, because that's the only way this is going to be okay in my head. No hate if you like it. Some of the artwork portrays the game in a neat way that has a bit more artistic license available without having to create a visually coherent video game. It's interesting. Definitely not written for me though, and there isn't a ton of rhyme or reason to the comps they write for the characters to play. If y'all are curious, let me know in the comments, and I'll make a follow-up video breaking down how the weapon comps they play in the Splatoon 3 era chapters would actually function in the real game. Maybe I'll bring on a guest if they're interested. I'm sure it'd be fun to clown on some of these with another analyst. Thanks for watching, everyone, and please, if you ever go to a Splatoon tournament, keep your clothes on.